Okay, I think that's working.
We're live.
Good evening, everybody. It's Sunday, it's 7 p.m., and we are live. This must mean the triumphant return of Sunday Night Live, Rabbi. How have you been?
How have I been? I think it's been 2 years since we've spoken. Ever since Sunday Night Live finished, I've stopped talking to you.
That's all right. We found what to talk about. But I genuinely want to thank Harris Fraser for his bravery in coming forward and telling his story, because it's sort of forced open Sunday Night Live again. A lot of people have come up to me and told me how much they missed it. They're glad it's back. I've had a few people come back to me to tell me how much they haven't missed it and how sorry they are it's back. But the fact that they're commenting on it is good. So I think we'll give it another go and see if we can tell some of the stories that people are talking about locally.
Absolutely. You know what I find funny, David? I don't know why people have to come and say we didn't miss it. Why did you bring it back? You just don't have to watch it. Like, you know, well, what's your problem? You don't like it, don't watch it. It's like you have to be disturbed that other people watch it. No, it's wrong. It shouldn't be there.
People need to tell you how they would do it if they were doing it.
But you're not doing it. No, but if I was, this is what I would do.
A very warm welcome to everybody and to a name that that has been following us the whole way through, but we've not seen for a while. Adam Patrick. So nice to see you, Adam.
Hello, Adam Patrick.
You can put comments, anything you want to ask into the comments section. That's the way we'll deal with it. It is completely live, and we will we'll deal with your comment as if you were speaking it on the line. And tonight we're joined by a guest who will be very familiar to a lot of people in Jewish Manchester, because he has been Mr. Jewish Manchester for such a long time, and that is none other than Jonny Wineberg of Jewish Action for Mental Health. I'm going to bring Jonny in because they're talking about. It's interesting because we've started something on Jewish leadership, youth leadership, and so has Jewish Action for Mental Health. So it's clearly time we talk about this. So let's bring Jonny in.
Absolutely. Have you seen, by the way, Simon Lader all the way from Las Vegas is commenting, youth leadership is super important. It's very good of you to highlight this issue. Simon, I wonder what it's like in America. Maybe you could comment in the comment section. What's it like by you guys in Las Vegas, if you're still in Vegas? I'm not sure if you moved from there. But what's it like down where you are? Are they working on Jewish leadership as well? And if they are, what are the programs that they're putting out over there?
Yeah, Simon Lader, it's worth me pointing out, was one of the best madrichim that I have ever had in any youth organization. But Simon was a pretty much constant figure during my teenage years, and he was excellent. Yeah, well, it wasn't actually. Simon was part, and I were part of a group called Ezra, which you don't hear about as much as BA. But it was very popular back in the day, and I guess that's part of it's a good way to perhaps start our discussions this evening. There are and have been for a long time youth groups that have been servicing our community and our youth. We don't hear so much from them these days, but that is in a lot of cases because they're under-supported, under-resourced. And that we've taken our focus off youth leadership somehow. And we need to try and put that focus back. Just to put it into perspective, and I know I've not called Jonny on tonight just to be controversial, but why not? Just to put it into perspective, there have been some stories in the press recently. I'm going to just put some of them up on on the screen here. So we had FZY camp, again, talking about safety. We had, and from the sublime to the ridiculous, there was a follow-up story of somebody who seems to be immensely privileged with a helicopter coming to pick up their kids and rescue them from a school camp.
I didn't even hear that story.
You're reading the wrong newspapers. This is all Jewish Chronicle. And here's a story that was covered in both newspapers, both Jewish Chronicle and the Jewish Telegraph, It was the story of a mum suing the camp, and I believe this one was B'nai Akiva, if I'm not mistaken. And again, that headline says, sources said that the goat had been whipped and mistreated in a manner too disturbing to print. So what we get the gist of, even if you don't read the detail here, and allegedly certain things have gone on, but we know that behavioral standards at school camps or out of school camps, I should say, is far more challenging these days than I remember it being in my youth. But maybe Jonny can give us a different
perspective. Not so sure. I think things are reported more, and often things get hyped up by social media and then picked up by mainstream media. So I'd be careful at saying things are worse, different, and so on. Things used to happen. I mean, I'm well aware, having back in the 80s and 90s, having been particularly involved in my youth organisation BYO, that there were many incidents, and I used to go and staff American conferences, and we invariably had something happen. 400 kids on a camp, you're going to have something happen. These are realities. How do we respond? Well, we try and safeguard the well-being of young people. That's the most important thing. So salacious headlines trying to demean young people is not a particularly clever thing to do. But yes, things might go wrong. Young people do things wrong. They're young people. They're not mature yet. And we need to recognize that. But we respond in that context. What we don't do is, call them feral and other words that really aren't very useful. Yes, we look to improve, but we look to support those youth organizations who are running things. We make sure that we do the right training, that they improve their systems, that they safeguard as well as possible. And parents need to be part of that and be supportive rather than undermine. So there's a lot that we can do very positively. The media's got a job to do, but one hopes that on occasion they might be a little bit more sensible in how they print.
It makes a good headline, though, doesn't it, Jonny?
That's the point.
Yeah. But I think the interesting question would be maybe to you, even just starting down this whole thing, is I think Jewish Action for Mental Health was started when things went wrong, specifically with youth and specifically with a young lady taking her own life. And we can talk about youth leadership. We can talk about provision for youth. And you were talking about social media in general, people being down on the youth. Maybe you can just walk us through that story again, without obviously mentioning too many details, how Jewish Action for Mental Health was created, why it was created, and maybe what you are doing currently to help and support people all around the community.
Absolutely. So it was 2018 that we saw some suicides in the community. And we recognised that there needed to be a response. Kate Laurie, Dr. Sandy Mann, and others wanted to do something. So they put a meeting together, and 700 people turned up to that meeting at the Shrubberies. And there was a panel and talking about what we need to do, how we can actually support young people, and how we can look to prevent these things happening again. People there were keen to see something happen. And indeed, over 30 organizations supported that initiative. From that, we developed Jewish Action for Mental Health, as it became, and started as a very small organization, just looking to have some sort of synergy between organizations, getting them to network, and looking at the gaps. So we started a student counseling and therapy opportunity for people, just looking to do a small amount of work. So that was late 2019. And then, of course, things changed hugely from 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit. And very quickly, we saw that there was a huge need for counseling and therapy in the community. People were looking for where they could get help, and people were paying people quite a lot of money, and often paying unqualified people, which was very concerning. So we recognized the need to professionalize, to make sure that people could get to the right support. And we were very fortunate to be able to get funding from the Jewish Leadership Council, from the National Lottery, and from what was then the Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership, which is now the Integrated Care Board. And that enabled us to offer free counselling and therapy to hundreds of people in our community, and also make sure that they were getting to qualified, accredited people who were registered with BACP and the accrediting bodies for counselling and psychotherapy. That was the most important thing that we did. We also work closely with partners, particularly with Neshama, who do adult mentoring and befriending support. They were partners in that. That enabled them to grow what they were doing and to support people who were coming out of hospital or who were having, adults who were having longer term issues. And that's incredibly important. The work they do is magnificent, with volunteers who they train up to become those befrienders and mentors. So we had a very holistic provision, and we added to that group support as well, those proactive, preventative pieces of work, so that people can enjoy themselves and not feel like that they're looking for additional support. Because what we really want to do is make sure people don't need counselling and therapy, because it costs a lot of money, but also we don't want people to be in that difficult position. Now, that has gone on for the last couple of years. We've been very fortunate in having people donate and support us. And again, we had right at the outset a wonderful donation from a family trust that enabled us to move forward. And that was even before the pandemic. But now what we've recognised is 40% of our client group are under 20. That's huge. In other words, young people are being more affected in terms of mental health than the adult population. So we have to do another different response to that. So besides the counselling and therapy, we've started to look to do preventative youth work. We've already had a couple of youth workers. Unfortunately, they haven't stayed long for various reasons. Our last worker very positively made Aliyah. So we're just looking to replace, and hopefully we'll be able to announce something very soon.
Jonny, talk to us a little bit about that, because you've invested quite a bit into this role. I mean, it's not just a sort of part-time job. This gives people an educational role that they can take forward into their career, and it pays them a living wage at the same time. So really, this is, I mean, I'll just flash up your advert on screen so people can see what it entails, but maybe you could talk us through it.
Yeah, and don't apply, because we've already interviewed, and like I say, we'll be announcing something hopefully very soon. So we're looking at somebody who can support young people to address issues in their lives, but also to come together and plan. Whoa,
sorry,
interesting.
Well, big fan of yours.
I thought it was mine.
Okay, so somebody's got an interesting character there. But yeah, somebody who can support young people, both one-to-one, but also bring them together in groups. And the key thing about youth work, it isn't about employing somebody to put things on for young people. It's about enabling young people and empowering them to put things on for themselves. And so that's the thing. So we've already, our previous worker, Nadav Wilson, who was wonderful, we worked together to train some young people as what we call JAMH ambassadors. So these are young leaders who worked together, and they put on a magnificent event where they invited the chief rabbi, who came along. They had a wonderful escape room activity before, and then he just came round and sat with young people and chatted to them, and wonderfully open, talking to them about any questions that they wanted to ask, and real positive engagement. They got a lot out of it. I know the chief rabbi did as well. So those sorts of opportunities aren't easy to organise if you don't have somebody in the right position to do that. Not only the worker, but also the young people who have been trained up to do that. So now the opportunity is to carry on, to not only for those young people to do more, but to bring the next group through, give them the training so that they can also put things on. And modern day youth work isn't about so much generic youth clubs and just any, hanging out. It's much more about specific activity that meets different needs. So groups of young people might look to do different things. Some might decide they want to visit old age homes. Some might decide they want to do, campaigning projects around eating disorders or drugs or whatever it is that they choose. Some might decide to do sporting activities or do heritage activities or do things around careers. It could be anything, but it's about meeting those diverse needs of young people by helping them to develop things that meet those needs of particular groups. You're not looking to get huge numbers to one activity. You're looking to get the number of young people who are interested in a specific thing to that activity and put on lots of different activities that meet their needs, and really for them to be putting on their activities. Yes, we can support them. We can do specific stuff around careers. We can help them find information. We can advise and guide. But at the end of the day, if it's not the young people looking about what their needs are and addressing them, you're not going to succeed. And along with that, to know where you're heading to and have very clear, measurable objectives so you can evidence to funders that you are doing positive things and you are making a difference. So all those things that we've got in place, and hopefully we'll see that carry through as we put our new worker in place and they develop.
How do you see a difference over there? Meaning, so you get this young fella like Nadav Wolfson, whom I knew because I used to teach him in Jewish grammar at times. So he puts on an escape room for people. How does that help somebody who is struggling with their own mental health suddenly feel better and not need the counseling that you were speaking about that was so expensive and so difficult to come by?
Okay, so the first thing is Nadav isn't just putting that on, it's the young people who are putting that on and he's supporting them. That's the important thing. So the worker is there to support young people to put things on. Then what happens is when young people have the opportunity to plan things themselves, the self-esteem immediately goes up, and more importantly, the self-efficacy goes up. In other words, the belief that you can achieve things. Because if people's self-efficacy is strong, then they're not going to believe that they are, in difficulties, that they're not going to be so anxious. So all of those things you've addressed quickly. That's in terms of those young people who are leading. For those who are participating, they also see those role models, so they can aspire to improve. But also the activity itself gives them a feeling that they can be included socially, they can be part of something. So again, you're starting to overcome the isolation that we sometimes see amongst young people. So there's a whole load of different things that you do. And then obviously at the end of that, you ask them, did it change things for you? How strongly did you believe you could achieve in life before you got involved? How strongly do you believe you can achieve in life now? So you can see that change happen. And when young people report on those changes and we measure, we average, so we aggregate the difference, we can then say, look, this is a real difference. That's why we've been successful in continuing to get funding, because funders have seen that and have been very positive. There's other things that we do as well, and I'll talk about that hopefully in a bit about working with partners.
We've got some questions coming in.
Real changes that you want to see. Come on.
We've got some questions coming in, and I think this one we'll go to Hannah Goldstone's question in a second. But first, just take Simon's, because it sort of echoes what I was thinking and what everybody might be thinking now. Well, yes, look, we understand Jewish Action for Mental Health and their position within the community and all the great work that they're trying to do. And we understand that taking preventative measures are sometimes the way that we can save money and resources down the line and not actually let things get that bad. But my question was, well, isn't this naturally where those youth movements should have sat and did sit for many years? Where have they disappeared to? But Simon puts it perhaps a little bit more eloquently. Question for Jonny. Do you see an advantage of having those things you talked about under the banner of a single movement, such as BA, Ezra, BBYO, NSCY, etc., etc.? And it's a question. Where are those groups? Are they as strong as they used to be? Do they mean as much to our kids nowadays in terms of philosophy?
So we've seen the demise both of youth movements and of youth clubs. London had a lot more youth clubs, but regardless, we've seen that demise in the mainstream community. Interestingly, in the more orthodox community, we have seen some of those popping up. In terms of the curriculum they're delivering, one might debate that it's actually not strong enough, and there's a need for support. And again, that's something we want to do. There is huge benefit to having diverse groups. The more different groups, the better. You could call it healthy competition, you could call it healthy cooperation, it doesn't really matter. The more choice that you can put out there for young people to find something that's right for them, the better. So yes, the movement should be doing it, and we should have infrastructure to support those movements. And indeed, I did that for almost 8 years for the Association for Jewish Youth. And that was back in the 90s when I used to work for them, where we were supporting all those different groups and supporting different initiatives like the North Manchester Jewish Youth Project, the South Manchester Jewish Youth Trust, and various others I was doing across the north of the country. So you need all of that. It's not one answer. It's always different answers, because different young people look for different things. And the more different things that you can put on, the more they're going to find the right thing for them. So that's part of where it's at. It's also not the case that it's just about mental health. Youth work is about so many more things. I still remember I worked for Manchester City Council for 4 years as Deputy Principal Youth Officer. And again, we sort of had this agenda that was put on us that it should be about stopping antisocial behaviour. No, stopping antisocial behaviour is a byproduct of good youth work. When young people are engaged and do positive things, they're not involved in antisocial behaviour, and they're not going to be. You're trying to get young people through their adolescence in a positive way and transition to be mature, helpful, community-minded adults. That's the reality of youth work. So don't focus on that negative outcome that you want to stop. Focus on the positives, and that's how those things are then affected.
We've got some more questions. Hannah Goldstone, first-time listener. Hello, Hannah. How you doing?
Hi, Hannah.
Hannah spends a lot of her time as well in education and Holocaust education for youth.
Amazing work that Hannah does. Brilliant to see her on. Absolutely, phenomenal. Hannah's work around, particularly Holocaust education.
Absolutely, vitally important. Very interested in this topic. A few points. Number one, we need regular meetings that are well organized for the kids. There are opportunities, but I've had to look for them for my two kids. Number two, I'm now enjoying my second leadership course after UJA one with Adam Science and JLC. We need to ensure that leadership skills are passed on and that funding is there for groups and parents. And number three, youth group camps can be very expensive, and I know that that's something a lot of parents will be shaking their heads right now. It's been a very expensive summer for people without any of them actually leaving the house. If they've sent their kids off to camp, they'll be feeling the cost of that. Jonny, do you want to talk about any of that?
Yeah, so the regular activities one's interesting. So where the youth groups are more successful is the summer programs. That's where they get the large involvement, but it's expensive. So it speaks to number three as well. Yeah, where they've weakened is those regular activities, as young people have far more choice, social media and game playing and all sorts of different things. They've stopped going to those regular activities. For those who are Orthodox, the one time that they do is when those things are turned off, which is Shabbos. So Shabbos, you find a lot of youth groups running, and you find obviously B'nai Akiva doing particularly well, and Ezra works on a Shabbos as well. So that still happens. But those who didn't are struggling, and we need to be honest. Habonim used to be wonderfully strong, is not now. BYO has a very small group in South Manchester, is non-existent in the rest of Manchester, and is mainly London-based. And again, even groups like FZY who meet at young people's homes, much weaker now. The groups who are still working well are the uniform groups. So GLGB and Scouts still work quite well and do regularly. And the 401st do a magnificent job along with the.
Do you think part of that might be because we live in a very different time now, where the political context of where Israel comes into the picture really complicates how youth feel about their Judaism and about whether or not they support Zionist entities or activities or youth groups and so on, because all the groups that you've just mentioned, Habonim, FZY, B'nai Akiva, Ezra, it was all rooted one way or another. It was just a different slice of Zionist ideology you were getting, but all of this was channeled towards getting the kids to sort of form a relationship with the land of Israel one way or another. You take that out of the equation, what are you now selling to those kids?
But it's still there. I mean, the Zionist youth movement still have that ethos, and people do still get involved. And there still is a huge interest, because Israel takes up more column inches in any media than any other situation in the world, which we know is bizarre.
But sometimes for the wrong reasons.
Sometimes for different reasons.
Yeah,
most certainly. And we've seen that change, and we've also seen some youth movements really struggle with some of that in terms of having to respond to how mainstream media portrays and indeed how our own media in the Jewish community portrays. So you have diversity of opinion, and that's all fine. But those groups still support Israel as you know, in terms of the concept, and still want to build that relationship. And indeed, Israel tours are the one thing that has not declined. Young people still want to go, still want to find out, but they need to find a way to take that back to more regular meetings, and it's very difficult. The way you can do it, and Hannah intimates this, leadership, but leadership has to be not only about giving young people skills, but then empowering them to use that. It has to be about really enabling young people to have the power to run their own things, and that means a real change. That it's not the 19, 20, 21-year-olds at university running activities, it's the 15, 16, 17-year-olds in the community who are running activities. That's how you get the ownership much closer to the participants. So it's peer leadership in its purest context. And if we can move to that, and the youth movements can embrace that more, then you can see the positivity. But you have to have professional support behind that. You have to have the professional training so that young people can actually take that on and feel confident enough to do that themselves. Without that, we don't get anywhere, and that takes investment.
Can I just ask a question before we get to Esti's question?
Yeah, sure.
How do you, as somebody who's trying to hire a youth worker, and really how do all youth groups, how are they fighting against, I mean, they're not fighting against, I think that's the wrong word, but how are they going to create programming that's going to be more exciting for kids to come out than sitting in front of their screens, in front of their phones, et cetera, et cetera? Changing the age group from 19, 20, 21 to 15, 16, 17 still hasn't yet answered the question that I'd rather sit and play my games on this for 3 hours, Minecraft and all the other stupid things that people do, rather than coming out and getting together in person. A lot of kids do not, I mean, I see it, okay, where I live, people still go out and they go riding bikes and playing football, but I don't know that people go and do the regular activities that we used to do when we were teenagers are just not nearly as popular anymore. We once went bowling with the shul. There was nearly nobody there because people are at home and watching Netflix and Amazon Prime and everything else, and nobody wants to go bowling anymore. Well, I remember we used to go bowling as teenagers. It was hard to get a late. So
again, it's this idea of don't put things on for young people, put things on by young people. That's where we need to move to. And give young people the skills to be able to put things on for their peers, to plan themselves, so that when they're developing and putting on, delivering that youth work, it's theirs. They own it, and it's going to be by definition the right thing to meet the needs of their peers. That's why you're looking at that 15, 16, 17-year-old age group rather than the Bob Grimm, who are that little bit older, who can still be there to support. That's still all great. But if the 15, 16, 17-year-olds are planning and delivering for their peers, you're far more likely to be successful, as long as that's done in the right context, that they're looking to meet need as well as achieve objectives. So they plan in a framework, and when I train young people, we use a Naomi framework, which is needs, aims, objectives, method, implementation, evaluation. And it means that they've got that context to plan in, that they're taking account of all those different things. What are the needs of the young people? Do we have clear aims and objectives? What's the best method to meet those needs and achieve our objectives? How are we going to implement? Let's look at all those safety issues, look at the timing issues and so on. And then let's make sure that we evaluate so we can prove that we've achieved those objectives, as well as it's the right method and we've met those needs. So when we train young people, that's what we train them in. And we also, as part of that, talk about diverse curriculum. So it's, again, you don't ever want this boredom. Boredom comes when you set up a youth club and you put a pool table and a table tennis table there and you say, that's it, go and enjoy yourself. It's nonsense. Because why would they enjoy themselves? There's a couple of kids who can play at a time who might be good at table tennis, enjoy playing pool, big deal. Yeah? Where's the diversity in that provision?
That used to work, by the way.
Well, it really didn't. I'm really sorry. Those things didn't. What worked was the conversations that happened between that, the enabling of young people, those different things that meant that where those young people got away from those simple things and did more complex things and did the visits to older people, did the fundraising or looked at Jewish history or whatever it might be. Those are the things that worked. And the argument's always been, yeah, but they'll come in because there's a pool table and a table tennis table. They'll come in because they're in control and they can do things, that are the right things for their group. That's the reality. So I've never used pool and table tennis tables in my work, and I can point to numerous examples of successful youth work. I grew up at BYO. BYO delivered a curriculum. We never had a pool table and table tennis table, and we were the group of the 80s, as people will know, that produced leaders that still are, leading our community in many different ways. So you don't need those very simple tools. You need lots of different ways to do things. And the curriculum that I have is a 10-point curriculum: social sport, arts, culture, social action, leadership, identity, health, environment, and careers.
I guess there goes our sponsorship with the pool table people.
I'm so sorry, but once a year, go and have a pool tournament. That's nice. Once a year. But
I can't even remember the last time I saw a pool table.
The number of kids I've walked into youth clubs that thought that was right, and the kids, they're bored. And as soon as that's happening, you know that something's not right.
But that's also a symptom of the day and age, isn't it? Because, activities such as pool, ping pong, whatever you any kind of those sort of indoor sports that you could get away with in wet Manchester on a Saturday afternoon, fantastic. But it also, in the 1980s, that would have been great, because it's all that there was. There wasn't anything to stare down at. There wasn't any sort of screens. There were 3 television channels.
To some extent, there's still a really successful
the football table. I remember people watching. There were 4 people playing and 15 people watching it, and everybody was engaged in that. Now that that's great youth work. That's not when I've seen it, but I think people were really excited about it.
No, the young people who are watching other young people invariably are actually quite bored, because it's a very boring thing watching other young people who aren't very good playing pool. And the number of times I've had youth clubs where the young people, you start to chat to them and say, "So what are you doing?" "No, not a lot. I'm a bit bored, really." That's the reality. Get them involved.
All I want to say is it's very disappointing that a man who wears as many waistcoats as you do is not into snooker. I find that hard to believe.
Oh, I love snooker. I love playing snooker. That's not the point. And I can play a decent game of table tennis. Again, that's not the point. But and look, Macabre are a brilliant table tennis club, and for those who are excited by that, that's brilliant. Let's make sure that happens and those young people get that choice. What about other young people who want to choose different things? That's the point. There will be a group for who that works, but for the majority, that's not the case. You need to look at different opportunities and allow them to develop those opportunities that might be about art, that might be about careers, and so on. And I can see Estie's question on there. How does it differ? Again, I've had some of those people on training that I've run, and that's great. And hopefully they're doing diverse programming. And again, as I said before, all of those different groups, that's great that they should be running that. Right. What we're looking to do with JAMH is try and support all of that and give young people even more opportunities to develop their own initiatives. And it's not trying to replace anything. It's trying to help that diversity.
So here's a follow-up comment from Esty. We actually have a really successful teen boys club for a mix of ability. What they love is the space to hang around, play games, table football, banter, lots of Nash, and just be friends. They don't need much structure, and parents say they literally look forward to the group all week long. It's challenging, isn't it, to get the balance right?
Yeah. So again, it's very easy to meet those basic needs of just pure fun, somewhere to hang out. But what are you actually achieving? Are you developing those young people? Are you giving opportunities to gain skills? Are you giving them opportunities to lead their peers? To even be peer mentors? Are you giving them opportunities to diversify their interests? So all of that, for me, should be added on. If you just do the very basic, young people will come for a bit and they'll enjoy it for a bit. But where do they then go to? So it's not just about meeting need. It's also about helping them to advance and helping them to actually lead their own groups and develop their interests and become, and this is the important point, become our next leaders. If all you do is they hang out, where are they getting their leadership skills from? Where are they learning to be a leader for the next generation?
I just wonder if that's with Estie's, the friendship circle. They might sort of be doing that. But Estie, you'll have to comment. If you could comment on that, be really good. I'm just wondering if she does that in conjunction with the friendship circle. So they have a hangout, but they actually might be doing a lot of really good work helping young adults or even proper adults that, to feel that they have friends, but also to hang out with their friends and their peers. So there is really a dual role over there, possibly.
Absolutely, and Clive, I can see, is saying absolutely right. So it's about, but I said this before, it's both for those who are leading those opportunities to hone those skills, but also for those who are participating to also achieve things and to improve. And again, people keep saying things worked. Again, my experience is, yes, back in the day when you didn't have all those other entertainments out there, it might have worked. But now, if you're looking to be more creative, and particularly to give young people with different interests or different opportunities, you need to think beyond ball and table tennis.
Can we talk about the elephant in the room? And you might tell me that, and I'd be delighted to hear that it's not an elephant in the room. But is the reality that this kind of work and to invest in this properly takes money? It takes money to be able to fund programs, to train people, and simply we need so much money going to other places within the community, and even our own kind of full-time educational establishments are crying out for money. Is this sort of part-time, almost youth leadership? I know you won't like me saying that, but has it been overlooked? Have we neglected our youth societies and our different clubs because actually they weren't majorly important? But are we beginning to find out that perhaps that's not the case?
So it's not just in the Jewish community, but in the wider community. There's been a devastating demise in terms of youth provision and investment in. You've seen local authorities with 80% cuts in youth provision just over a decade ago as part of austerity. It was an easy cut. And yet, when you have local meetings, almost always people say youth work, really important. We need to making sure there's stuff for youth. It's the professionalism of that youth work that's been undermined. We've invested in formal education, and that's okay. It's needed. We need schools and so on. Where's the investment in informal education? And the reality is that youth work has always been a Cinderella service, both within our communities and in the wider community. And yet, the gains that we see for young people from engaging, from being empowered, from being getting those life skills, getting those leadership skills are huge. And in fact, you can argue, and I would argue, that for many it is so much more valuable than that formal education. But it just doesn't get the investment. People don't see it. And whereas a school can say, please make your voluntary contribution, and here's your non-bill bill as they get, we just can't do that. We can ask, very nice if people for donations, but people see it as a nice add-on. They don't see it as the profession that it is. The amount of skill to be a youth worker, to have the communication skills, the team building skills, those skills around life and particular issues, to be able to educate around bullying, eating disorders, racism, disability issues. I mean, it's huge. The diversity of skills needed is massive. I did a one-year postgraduate in youth work. There's 3-year degree courses. You want people to be as professional as possible, because when you engage with young people on either a one-to-one or a group work basis, you need to be able to do so really well, because a mistake can be really devastating. So we need professionals, and that needs investment. We're so lucky that there is money at the moment for apprenticeship. So our new youth worker will be on a degree apprenticeship. They'll be working full time, but have a day release, going off to Bradford, because it's the only place in Greater Manchester that's offering a degree apprenticeship at the moment. So they'll be at Bradford University once a week.
Bolton.
Sorry, Bolton.
Bolton.
Sorry. Brain freeze, my apologies. Bolton University once a week, studying and learning to be a professional, because we struggled over the last year to try and find a professional youth worker. We couldn't find somebody qualified. So we're going to grow. We're going to grow our own youth workers. And what I would say is we're paying a living wage. And if anybody else wants to follow the same path, I'd love to talk to them, because you've still got 3 weeks before Bolton close. And if you think you can find somebody and offer the support, you've got some money, do it. If you commit a 3-year program, if you're a Shull, if you're another institution, you've got an 18, 19-year-old who wants to go and study, rather than paying out 27 grand for a degree over the next 3 years, get it for free and earn a salary. I think it's a brilliant thing, and we're very fortunate to be in a situation where, with lottery and other money, we can afford to do that.
Certainly seems like a great program. I'm just going to flash up Estie's follow-up comment here. She said, yes, Rabbi, that's right. It's a mixed ability. So for some kids, it's about self-confidence and learning to socialize and make friends. And others, it's just a time to come and join in. So many kids need help with self-confidence and should not be forgotten just because they won't be the leadership ones. Case study, one dad said his kid won't come because he won't get off his iPad. So I said he should come and sit on his iPad on the side, and at least he's around the other boys. He's now completely, I'm presuming it goes on to say they're completely engaged, which is great. Absolutely.
I've said it's not just about the leadership, it's about other things. Is Bolton Community from Vegas? Probably not. But it is about those other things. It's about what you deliver. But if young people are delivering to other young people, they are aware of need and responding to need, that's exactly the sort of thing that Estee is pointing out. And Estee's been so supportive in all of this as well. But yes, we need to meet those different needs. So 100%, that young person can come in, do their thing. Maybe there's a few other young people who have a similar interest, and they can form a group and start to look at that together, maybe even start to learn programming or whatever it is that it takes them to.
So, Jonny, I know that you're doing some fantastic work around this, and the rabbi is going to tell us very shortly about what we're doing around this as well. But there are other organizations that are trying to fight the same battle, perhaps from a slightly different perspective, but we're a sizable community, and as we always keep saying in our communal discussions, our demographic has changed in terms of who are the consumers of the sort of content that youth groups might put out. But typically, it is the Haredi side of the community now that is really has needs that do dwarf the mainstream community just in terms of numbers. But they've got a number of fantastic initiatives, and there are people out there doing some fantastic work with youth, people like A.Y. Goldman and the helpline and so on.
Listen, man has just come up with something new. Have you heard of that one?
I've not seen that yet.
Yeah, so Definition has come out with something. I can't remember what it's called now, but our neighbor across the road is a young individual about 24, 25, who's going to be helping them with the youth leadership over there, and they've opened up this club for high school boys, post-school club that they have on different days for different schools, etc., etc. They have well over 100 people signed up already, and they've just opened up. They've not even started yet, and people are paying a monthly contribution of like 20, 30 pounds, and they have over 100 Haredi boys that have already signed up for this.
And there's a number of others. Eitz Chaim has had a really successful informal education program over many years. So absolutely, and I've been very fortunate to support some of those initiatives in the Haredi community. There's a large mentoring program going on as well that's been really successful. Again, I was involved with at the beginning. All of these things are absolutely essential. The more diverse provision, the more choice that we can have, the better. And not just for young boys. We often forget young women, and there are provisions, and Karen doing an amazing job in terms of particular needs of one group, and there are other initiatives. We need to see more of that, because one of the things that our community needs to be far better at is those quieter people who are often young women getting the same opportunities as young men. So that's something that needs to be looked at, and hopefully we'll see again that investment for them too.
It'd be lovely if we could get to a stage where we retain some of our youthful talent here in Manchester as well. Not send them all off to Las Vegas.
Well, Las Vegas wasn't so much the issue, but when you've got Zionist youth movements who have a particular intent to send young people off to Israel, we're self-fulfilling a prophecy that might not be. But some of our leaders are still those who never actually made it to Israel from Bnei Kiva and so on. So, we do see some of those people staying. And
there's an awful lot of those Aliyah trips that seem to get stopped at London for whatever reason. And I think there's a wider discussion ongoing at the moment in Jewish Manchester, if you like, about how we can actually invest in our communities, because we know it's going to take investment, it's going to take action, it's going to take a bit of education, but how can we actually sell Manchester to youth on its strength? How can we retain talent?
That's not so much youth. That's about young adults, and that's about jobs, housing, schooling, and I would say good informal education as well, i.e. youth work. So it's showing them a picture that actually means that people want to come here because of what's provided. And for the Haredi community, that's very true. That's why we see people coming in. But for the mainstream community, it's not. And so we need to do far better in terms of those things.
Jonny, thank you very much for your time and input tonight, and the fantastic work that you and all the others at Jewish Action for Mental Health are carrying out there. You've absolutely changed the face of mental health provision locally. We're very, very spoiled to have you. I don't think we appreciate that sometimes, but where you can get to see a therapist with virtually no waiting list is just unheard of in other parts of the country.
Thank you for that. And can I just say, I know that Rabbi Eisenberg is going to talk about what you're doing, but what you have done at the Shrubs, investing in youth work and investing in young people over the last few years has been phenomenal and so important for that part of the community. And I just hope that others see that and start to look to replicate what you've done. Kol hakavod for everything that you've been doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonny. Have a great week.
Have a good one.
See you soon. Okay.
Who else has done an amazing job? I know this is a Shrubs program, but the Whitefield has invested hugely in that as well. And I think the investment that they've done over there has really paid off. I mean, you watch some of the things that the programs they put on, how many people they get to the different programs. It's really impressive what Michal Balshein with his team has created. And I think he also has created what Jonny was talking about over there, a team of youth leaders that are able to then create further programs for the youth.
It's that barometer of whether or not we're actually healthy and doing well always seems to be the youth. We talk about this after every Yom Tov, but we very often at Shrubs will say, did you see how many prams there were parked outside Shrubs on whichever day it may be? It's great. It shows that at some point you're getting them into the system, but this is also about how we nurture them upwards, and particularly it seems to be sort of the teenage years is where we lose people, because we live in a world where you don't need you don't need to invite distraction in. It's there in abundance, but we're not engaging them in the same. It's harder. It is harder. I know Jonny says it's ever been that way, but I feel that the behavioral challenges are huge.
Much worse. I just spoke to a teacher just today, a couple of hours ago, who has left teaching. He was teaching in Masifta and has left teaching. And I said to him, listen, why'd you leave? And he said, it's just getting more and more difficult. He said, teaching an A set is sort of doable, but he was teaching a B set. And he said, you're looking at kids that are busy at home all the time, watching things, seeing things, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, these kids are just not interested, and they're just not switched on by regular classroom teaching. And unless you can open them a classroom teaching that's almost like some kind of documentary with constant clips and things going on over there, it's just almost impossible to really keep the kids of today engaged. They're just not listening anymore.
It's certainly something that I think we all need to double down and invest in. And I think that funding for these sort of things is something that it shouldn't really just be an if or a maybe, or it'd be nice to have. I think it's probably where it needs to go. But Rabbi, this week, obviously I saw Jonny's advert for that job, which was very interesting, and I had a chat with him about what they were doing. And then pretty much simultaneously, the same second, I get a message come up from our events group at Shrubs, and it's talking about a program that you're running together with Sarah. So yeah, can you tell us a bit about that?
Okay, so let's first of all give credit where credit is due. Yaakov Golden, who's done an amazing job also at the Anim Zmirs Club. So, shout out to Yaakov Golden. We had 15 boys that managed Anim Zmirs this year because of the Anim Zmirs Club, and he was the one that taught them. So big shout out to him. So when we had a youth meeting, it wasn't a youth meeting, it was really the youth sort of like leaders meeting. So it was myself and Kate Lurie and Simon Kay and a whole bunch of other people around the table. If I've left you out, if I've left you out, I do apologize. Don't remember Gary Freeman. We were all sitting around, and Yaakov Golden says, when I was in London and I was a youth leader, one of the things we did in London was a youth leadership training. So we did a Bar and Bas Mitzvah group, which was the last year, and we did it for the years 7, 8, and 9. And what ended up happening is now, thank you, Johnny. I do think that's amazing what they've done over there in Whitefield. Absolutely. So what ended up happening is now we finished this Bar Mitzvah, and we said, well, what are we doing next? And Yaakov says, well, why don't we run a youth leadership program for the kids? And after that, what we basically did is we sat down, the three of us, Sarah, myself, and Yaakov, and we went through certain things. And what we're going to be doing in this training, so let me talk about some of the things that we're going to be doing. I just have it in the background. So if it looks like I'm reading, it's because I'm reading. And what the things that we might be doing is we're going to be talking about what it means to be a Jewish leader. We're going to be giving them different skills, such as in first aid. We're going to be teaching about healthy mind, discussing feelings, etc., etc. Healthy body, things like Andrew Sape or MD Cantor, Deborah Fraser. S.D. Brooks can come and speak about accepting other people's special needs. Talk about Shabbat Walk, the organization that they do, mental health, relationships, CST protecting community, addictions and dangers of it, e-safety, alcohol and substance abuse, organizing, living an organized life pre-Pesach, presentation skills with myself and Lisa Jacobs, depending on the boys and the girls. That's basically the idea behind what we want to do. And what we want to do is we want to enable the kids and give the kids different skills, and then to tell them to go out there and to do stuff. Because I really believe that the future is with the youth. And the problem is that nowadays, you look out sometimes at the communities and the organizations. We're very fortunate in our shul in that we had 3 people on the executive that were sort of either hitting 40 or just over 40, right?
Yeah.
There are very few shuls that have an executive that's so young. Many shuls, executive is, it's the Alta Knackers and whatever you want to call them at 60 and at 70, and nobody else wants to sort of come in. And bringing in the young people means that they might be able to bring in their peers. They might be able to say, guys, come on in. There's great stuff going on at the shul. And whether they come for an educational event, whether they come for a social event, but being involved together as a community is so important, because when we are involved together as a community, what ends up happening is everybody feels better about themselves. And I think that's what Johnny was speaking about before, is the sense of belonging helps so much for people's mental health struggles. When you feel I'm part of something bigger, I'm not on my own, other people are out there and other people are looking out for me or whatever else it might be, it's such an important part for young adults, for adolescents, but even for adults. This lunch and learn that I started recently with, it was Elliot Simon's idea. And we started about 6 months ago, lunch and learn. And I was like, nobody's going to come to this. How many people are going to come? But I've had almost consistently over 20 people coming to lunch and learn.
Are they coming to the lunch?
They're coming to the lunch. They're stuck with me. What should I tell you?
I heard you've got to get there early to get the good stuff.
You got to get there early, get the good stuff. People like to take 1 and 2 and 3 bagels and lots of smoked salmon. You come late, there's no smoked salmon for you. So we've had to sort of start hiding stuff. And it's just been very...
It's great that it's been so successful.
We can have. I said to Ian, this problem, rather than sorting the problem with trying to limit how much food we give everybody, we buy more food and get more people to come. Thank you, Clive. I appreciate it. Lunch and Learn it's been great. But you know what? People like to come because people say it gives me something to do. And it's a great social, it's a great discussion. It ticks so many boxes, and I'm so happy that we're doing it. And I think there are many groups like this. My mother-in-law has now joined a group. They've started a group called Reyut, which is a group for widows of all ages. And they sort of get together and they run programs together. And again, here is a segment of the community that unfortunately might feel very, very lonely and vulnerable because they don't have their spouse anymore. And by getting together and being there for each other and doing things together, they feel a sense of belonging. They create new friendships. And I think this is something that's important across the board. And unfortunately, children nowadays have lost the ability to really develop good friendships because they've lost the ability to communicate, because everybody communicates via phone and via WhatsApp message, and talking is not in vogue anymore.
It's true. My kids don't know that the phone actually makes phone calls as well as messages.
Yeah, it's weird. I once saw, I don't remember where it was, but I remember once seeing they showed a, they asked young people what they use their mobile phones for. Number 5 was phone calls, right? There were 4 things you use your mobile phone for ahead of phone calls. To me, a mobile phone is mainly about phone calls, but probably was social media and web browsing and listening to podcasts and everything else. And we're constantly bombarded with information, so that if you speak to people like, remember, Deborah Fraser spoke about it a lot, about the mindfulness, just being there in the moment. And we have lost the ability to just be there in the moment. How many people walk down the street just enjoying themselves and looking around? And how many people, as they walk down the street, feel the need to pull out their phone, either to listen to something, to make a phone call, or to compose an email? Because otherwise, I'm not doing anything.
I think one of the worst things that I've found is that when I do see something I appreciate, or something I think is beautiful, I instantly grab my phone because I think, oh, I'm going to take a picture of this now.
And share it
and
on social media.
I ruin my own moment because
Yes.
I'm thinking about how to document it rather than how to live in it and appreciate it.
Well, look, you go to concerts, or you go to everything. I remember going to weddings, and especially when you go to weddings where they bring in a great band and everything, half the people, rather than dancing, are busy taking a video so that they can show their kids what happened. And so you're not in the moment because you're too busy capturing the moment for posterity. But then you miss the real moment. The moment on the phone is not real. And so what we need to, I think, bringing people back, I know it's interesting, is we can argue about this point with Jonny about whether you do or don't agree with. I remember when we were kids, we used to love going to youth groups because they had a pool table and yes, you had to wait your turn, but you know what? It was fun to watch other people play. And when it was your turn, it was your turn. And it was still, to me, I don't know about you. Hilarious.
Simon loving watching the irony of watching criticism of mobile phones on his mobile phone. But that's also, Simon makes a great point. We've this medium of communication that we're enjoying now, this thing that we're putting on, whether it's just for Simon's benefit, but there's a handful of people that are watching this live. There are plenty of people that are going to watch it during the course of the week. But to make this available to people and to be able to get this discussion that you and I and Jonny have had out there to the public, it now costs us nothing to do that. And it is amazing. That part of it is the advantage.
Yeah, well, look,
but it also represents a challenge.
This kept us saying during COVID, if we didn't do this, Hannah, that's a great point, to ban phones at your door's bar mitzvah for that very reason. How did you actually enforce that? I'll be interested to see how they did that. How did you enforce a banning of phones? I know people, for example, that have told me that before they go into supper, there's a little box, and everybody got to deposit the phone in that box, and the box goes in another room, and supper is supper. But that's really important, because I think a lot of the reason why people are anxious today, people feeling depressed, etc., is because we lack the human interaction that's necessary for others and for ourselves to feel. Oh, she's very strict with it.
She is. In fact, I've met her, and I know her husband, and he tells me very strict.
They're strict people. Yeah, it works for you. But, if you can have supper together around the supper table without anybody looking at the phone or any screen, etc., so it means you've now spent time socializing with people. You've discussed your feelings. You've told people how your day was. People have taken an active interest in you without being disconnected from you. And I think what mobile phones have done to us is they've disconnected us from each other. And I almost feel like the way for us to be able to move our children on, we'll see what John has to say in a minute, but the way for us to move our children on is we should really, I know that it might be difficult to do that, but when we give our kids phones, we should really create parental controls. And these phones do have parental controls. And if you can put in parental controls and say, look, you can have 2, 3, 4 hours of phone a day, but that's when it's finished, and then it's going to turn off, and be a little bit stricter with it. I remember when we were kids, it goes back, we only had 2 TV channels in Austria when we were kids. And I remember that every child in our house was given half an hour. My mother was very strict, like Anna is. She was very strict. Everybody had half an hour. You could choose between 3:30 and 6 was kids programming. You could choose one program during that half hours, and during that half hour, and that was yours. And then that was it. There was no more TV for the day. But you know what that means? That means that you read, and that means that you have to have conversations. That means you have to go outside. But all these things, why shouldn't I work on having meaningful conversations and meaningful contact with other people when it's so easy to sit and to look at my phone?
It's also that paradox of choice that they talk about when you're trying to sell something. If you give somebody a multitude of different options, the person cannot make a decision because you're giving them too much choice.
Yes.
And what we have on choice for young adults these days, to take their fancy and to sort of take their attention, is there, you know, when you ask them eventually what they would like to do, very often you get the response that they don't know. So, you know, we've got to try channeling it in a way that sort of Jonny has suggested as well. Let's just have a look at what Jonny said. Video chat technology has actually been around for 30 plus years, and we were showing people how to use it back in the 90s. However, it took a pandemic for it to really take off. Very true. For all the wrong reasons and all the right reasons, it kind of all came through in the end. Hannah says that her school has a strict no phone policy, which I think is very sensible. And Simon saying Hannah Goldstone mine too, and only allow flip phones, no smartphones at all. Well, there you go.
So my kids aren't allowed phones in their schools at all. You know, in the Haredi schools, they don't allow for it. My daughter, who's in seminary, is not allowed a phone either. So when she comes, she has to hand in her phone. But you know what? Even if they would allow for them, we as parents believe they're not good for our kids. You know, we believe that our kids don't gain from them. You know, that doesn't mean that we've stifled our children. They're allowed to use computers and allowed to, et cetera, et cetera. They have ability to make those choices, and they've learned how to use that technology. But I don't want my kids engaging in that for hours and hours and hours a day, because when they do, everything else suffers. And I think we, you know, as a community, need to try to re-engage kids, and maybe teach parents that it's their job to re-engage their kids as well. Excuse me. And until
that's also very true, because we've discussed about when we brought up very briefly that article at the beginning about the mother suing the school camp or the youth camp. Who has got the responsibility for our kids? Do we delegate that out to the schools? Do we delegate that out to youth movements? Are schools responsible for it? And at some point, we have to step forward and say, actually, you know, the buck stops with us. And that we have to therefore get involved in pushing them forward to, you know, to leadership roles. But I think it's, you know, when we talk about leadership, we're talking about responsibility. And some kids, most kids, I'd say, but some kids thrive on having positions of responsibility, having a mission that they need to account for, because I think that gives them a fixed goal, doesn't it?
Mm. Have a look at what Simon said. It's very interesting. It's a good tool to know about.
Google Family Link is a great free tool for parents to monitor and control kids' cell phone usage. There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Straight from America. Well, thank you very much. We've kept all these people up. I've got to get off to a bar mitzvah.
Yeah. But David, I would like to ask you, I really think that there's a lot more mileage in this discussion, and we should turn this into part 2 about the youth groups that, you know, the articles that you mentioned at the beginning. We really didn't get a chance at all to discuss that, you know, about the bad behavior in these camps, whose fault it is, how do we stop it, you know, how do these youth groups deal with it? Because I don't blame the youth groups for the bad behavior of the kids, but on the other hand, they've gotten the rap for it also. I think there's so much to discuss over there.
There's a load of questions around that. And really one of the other questions is as well, we're going to try and encourage our kids to step forward at, say, the age of 15 or 16 and get involved in becoming leaders. That's all well and good, but are we able to adequately, can we expect them to put up with some of the behavior that they're going to be policing? Are they at that age even capable
So, but that's
policing
why you
some of
need
it.
those people on top of them, like what you were
Yeah.
saying before. I think you can hand sort of the leadership partially to the young people, and I think it's a great thing, but I think there always needs to be a responsible adult. I must tell you, we ran a girls' camp for 5 years, my wife and I, and we did have other people. Thanks, Simon. Right? That's a good comment. I think that one needs to go up right away.
Well, this is the best comment I've seen all day. It's lunchtime there. I could go for that.
Enjoy your lunch. Yeah. Great show, guys. First time listening, definitely not the last. But I think what we saw in those camps was that we gave the leadership to young ladies, and we had another couple other people to help us. But I did see that over there, that there were certain behaviors where they came to us and said, okay, Rabbi Eisenberg, what are we supposed to do with this? This is above our pay grade. And these are already girls that were already post-SEM. Some of them were 22, 23, 25 even. But they're still saying, I'm a young single girl. You've been a parent for nearly 20 years. You got to help me out on this one. Right?
And I'm sure the answer to that is specialist training, really, and making sure that they're equipped with the correct skills to deal with it.
We're not always equipped. I can say we're not always equipped.
I don't think we're always equipped, and I think we're much more aware now of certain conditions. You know, people, kids. You know, when you drop them off at camp in the old days, there used to be a form, a disclaimer that you'd sign that, you know, if they fall off a mountain or whatever, you're not going to take any action. But now the form is different. It's, you know, you need to list all the conditions that your child may have, if they have any particular special needs, dietary needs. I mean, everybody has we're all very much individual in that respect these days, and we encourage it. But everybody, from a planning point of view, is, you know, it can get to be a handful, can't it? And so ultimately, the organizations need to sort of find a way of dealing with all of that and catering for it. But if it filters down to sort of 16, 17-year-old kids to deal with, they'll do the best that they can on that day and not a lot more. And it is a question. It's
unfair. I think it's unfair to these kids. And that's why Johnny's right. We need professional youth workers. But what I would say is that some of these professional youth workers, even they might be faced with things that are above their pay grade, because you get lots of things. When you go to a camp and there was 200 girls in that camp, there's lots of stuff getting thrown at you all the time. Anyway, David, you need to get your bar mitzvah. I think next week, maybe, or in a couple of weeks' time, we can go back and
I think what we're going to try and do. So we are now getting approached by people who want to come on to Sunday Night Live and speak about their stories and the things that are dear to them. So I just want to encourage anybody who's got a story to tell, anybody that thinks that there's something interesting to talk about, that it's something our community should be aware about, please do come forward, and we'll be doing as many of these as we can whilst there's call for it. I was approached in Shul over Shabbos, and so this coming Sunday we will once again dive back into this subject on youth education, if you like, and leadership. We'll try and do part 2 that the rabbi was talking about and see if we can get some of those organizations that we were talking about to actually join us and talk about it as well. We will also be picking up with, I'm going to be picking up with Jeff Radivan, who we've had on our show previously. In the newspapers more recently, saw Rishi Sunak and some of his ministers talking about what they consider to be Mickey Mouse degrees, so degrees that are not high value for them in terms of whether or not they feed back into the economy or produce jobs and so on. But the rest of us think that the world is changing, the future economy looks very different, and there's a need for those courses more than ever. And Jeff has his own unique perspective on that, having taught within those systems for so long. So we'll be talking to him about that as well, and hopefully we can cover part 2 of this at the same time.
Yes, Hashem. Look forward. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great week, everybody.
Everybody, take care. Bye-bye.